Hey guys, in today's episode I want to show you how to install backsplash tiles in your kitchen. They say that the kitchen is the heart of a house, and it's true. It's where your day begins, where you eat, and where you hang out. In a way, it's the social hub of the whole family. A tile backsplash can improve the look of your kitchen, and it will protect your walls against water, oil, and food stains. It makes it easier to clean and maintain, and the most important thing, it's gonna add value to your property. Of course, if it's installed correctly. So in this quick video, I will show you how to take care of this all by yourself. These are some before shots from the same kitchen. As you can see, beside installing the backsplash tiles, we also filled up that gap between the top cabinets and the ceilings. And that made a huge visual improvement. You be the judge, and please let me know in the comment sections what you think of this. Let's take another quick look at the after shots before we jump into the process. So the first thing we gotta do is to move the appliances out of our way. I also remove the range hood or the microwave to tile behind it as much as I can. This way, if they go with a different brand with different measurements, they don't have to retile this whole area. At the very max, they may have to replace 1 or 2 tiles. From the main electrical panel, I turn off the breakers for those outlets on the kitchen wall. Now it's time to remove the cover plates from all these outlets and light switches. And now, before I unscrew and pull out the actual outlets, I like to test them to make sure they're not live. As you can see here, I got myself a light and I plugged it into every one of them to see if they're live. So this one seems to be still live. I went back to the main panel and turned off the breaker for this one as well. Now I can unscrew the actual outlet and pull it out of the box. After pulling out the receptacle, I like to apply some electrical tape to the back side of it and cover up all those screws and the bare wire, so this way if you have to run your fridge or let's say coffee machine or whatever basically inside that kitchen while you're working on the tiles, you're not going to get electrocuted. So in a way, this is going to work as an insulation, and even if you hit it accidentally, you're not going to get electrocuted. And then I get myself a sponge and a little bit of soapy water and wash up the entire walls. I use dish soap for cleaning basically, and then I wash up all these walls again with just pure water to make sure everything is nice and clean. In this kitchen there was some flat paint on the walls, so I didn't have to sand down. If you have shiny or let's say semi-gloss or glossy paint on the walls, make sure to sand it down with 100 grit sandpaper before you actually wash it up. This way when you install your tiles, it is going to adhere to the surface much easier and better. I like to cover up the island and the floors to keep everything nice and clean. I removed some of my tiles from the box, and then I put them on top of my countertops, and I used tapes to keep them in place. And then I turned on my laser level to see how nice and level my countertops are. This laser level shoots a 360 line around the whole room. These countertops were off a little bit here, but at that other side, after where the fridge is gonna be, the countertops are off about 5/8 of an inch. That means that this cabinet is sitting 5/8 of an inch higher than the rest, so I have to cut the bottom of the tiles that go in this area about 5/8 of an inch. And now on this other end of the kitchen, as you can see, this countertop is sitting about 1/4 of an inch below the laser line. So that means this cabinet is sitting 1/4 of an inch below the rest of the cabinets. Luckily, this area is pretty small and the homeowner is planning to put their utensils and oils in this part of the kitchen. So I am going to be raising these tiles to meet that laser line on this specific area. This is the back part where the stove is going to go. So I grabbed my stud finder and marked the studs. I cut myself a piece of trim to the exact measurements of this opening. And then I lined up the right side of it with the countertop. On the left side, I put a tile on top of this trim piece. And then I lift them both up until it was lined up with that laser line, and then I drove 2 nails in place so it can keep it nice and secure in place. This is gonna work as a straight edge and it's gonna hold my tiles while I'm tiling this back wall. In a little bit from now, I will also show you another method of doing this with a tile edger, so you can pick which one is the right fit for your application. Once this is done, I tape up all the countertops right where the wall is. This is my favorite tape applicator, and the homeowner was pretty amazed seeing how easy and nice it is to apply tape with this. I will leave a link in the descriptions for this specific product in case you're interested of buying one for yourself. But I got this one from Sherwin-Williams Paint Store and they keep it at the back, so you may not be able to find it in the front part of the store, so don't forget to ask them. I'm pretty sure they can bring you one from the back. I like to cover up all my countertops with a piece of plastic and I apply some tape right at the end part so it's completely nice and sealed. This way we can protect our countertops against any drop of thinset that we're going to be using to adhere our tiles to the walls. This is the tile edger piece that I was talking about previously. I leave a mark where exactly it needs to be cut, and then I place it underneath of a nice and flat piece of trim, and then I cut it with my miter saw. I'm not using any type of a specialty blade. This is basically the cheapest blade that I could find on the market. It's probably like 10 bucks, and I use it for this. It does a wonderful job. Take a look at this cut and see how nice it is. As you can see, it turned out great. You can use a file to go over the burrs. This way you can get it super nice and perfect. So the trick to get nice and perfect cuts on these tile edgers is to place a nice and flat trim on top of the tile edger and then put it under the miter saw and cut it down. Take a look at this cut and see how amazing it turned out. This is the area behind the fridge. I put this tile edger right where exactly it needs to go, and then I put a piece of tile on top of it, and then I move them both up until I hit the laser line. I use a staples to attach this to the wall. I repeat this process on the other side. I place a tile on top of this and raise it up until I hit the laser line, and then I move that tile around to make sure the whole entire surface is nice and level exactly like what I want. And then I drive a few more staples to keep it in place permanently. I put my staples right into that empty triangle shapes on the tile edger, so make sure not to staple it right onto the metal part. Now it's time to talk about the thinset that we're going to be using for this application. Now there are so many different types of mortar and thinset available in the stores. Every time I go to the Home Depot, I see people confused what to use for what project. This is a very cheap mortar that you can pretty much find at any hardware store. There is no modified polymer properties inside this product, so if you use this, your tiles are not going to adhere to the wall properly, or they are going to come off in a little while after you install them. So make sure to stay away from this. This is a good product. It is polymer modified and it comes in white and gray colors in case you have darker tiles. But the only downside with this product is that your tiles are going to sag when you're installing them. Especially with backsplash tiles that they're going to be smaller, it's going to be a hassle. So stay away from this product as well. This is my favorite thinset for any backsplash project. Don't freak out by the price of this product. We live in Canada and this is what we have to pay for it. In the US, it's half price. This product is crack proof, it's sag proof, and it's lifetime warranty if you mix and use it properly. And this is the only product that I use for any backsplash project because it's gonna save me so much time and hassle when I'm installing little tiles. I put some water in the bottom of my bucket and then I pour some of that thinset on top of it and mix it up until the thickness looks like peanut butter. I mix it pretty good for about 4 to 5 minutes and then I let it sit down for another 4 to 5 minutes. After it sits for a little bit, I mix it again for another 2 to 3 minutes and we're gonna be good to go. I put a tile in the corner and then I set up my laser line vertically and horizontally, making sure that it's exactly where I want the first tile to be. So this is gonna work as a guide and it's gonna tell me where exactly my first row of tiles are gonna be. This laser level is capable of shooting 2 lines, one vertical and one horizontal, and it's gonna be 360 degrees around the entire room. These laser levels are gonna be a game changer. I'm gonna leave a link in the descriptions of this video so you can buy them from Amazon. You can find so many different types of these for less than $100 on Amazon. Just make sure to buy a type that has 360 degrees lines around the room. It is gonna save you a lot of time and money. and it is going to be your best friend doing any renovation project in your house. Now it's time to put the tin set right onto the wall. I got myself a notched trowel, but I am using the flat side of it to spread the tin set right onto the wall nice and evenly. Once it's nice and even, I use the notch side to make all those lines nice and perfect. I wipe off the bottom part of the tin set and on the corner of the wall with my finger. This way when I'm putting the tiles down, I'm not going to have a mess in that area. This way the tin set is not going to squeeze out. Now it's time to test and see if the thickness of the tin set that we put onto the wall is enough. I'm just going to slap this tile right into the tin set. I didn't use any pressure. As you can see, it's sitting pretty nice and perfect and it's not sagging. This is the reason why I said to use that kind of a tin set, and it's extremely important. Now I won't be able to remove this by hand, so I had to use some kind of a tool to remove it, and I gotta say it's pretty difficult to take it off. Now we have to check that pattern behind the tile and onto the wall and see if it's enough. In my case, as you can see it here, it's not enough. This is the texture that you want to have on the back of your tile and onto the wall, but for here I'm just gonna be okay. I'm gonna go on. For any other lines that I'm gonna be building from now on, I'm gonna apply a little bit more tin set. Now it's time to put the first tile in place and push it down. I had a little bit of the tin set squeeze out from the side, so I cleaned it with a drywall knife. And then on the top, I noticed there's a lot of tin set sitting there, so I wiped it off with my finger. This way that joint stays nice and clean when I put the next tile on top of this. I put the next tile right on top of the first one and move it to the right and left a little bit, making sure that that tin set is completely pushed right onto the backside of this tile. I push up the tile that is sitting on the top, and then I place my spacers right in between the two tiles. This way I get a very nice and even spacing throughout this whole joint. These are the tile spacers that I used for this project. Now the rest is just a repeat. We're gonna stack these tiles on top of each other and push it back to the wall and wiggle it down a little bit to the right and left, and then we're gonna lift it up and place our spacers in between the joints. As far as the pattern, as you can see it here, I am stacking these tiles right on top of each other. It looks simple, but honestly it's pretty difficult to get these lines to be very nice and perfect, especially that the tiles that I was using here are not perfect tiles. So if you take a look at the edge of these tiles, a lot of them are not perfect. They're either bowed up or bowed down, and that makes it a lot more difficult to install in this pattern. So if you don't find this pattern very desirable, I highly recommend you to go with brick pattern. That's going to be a lot easier than this, and also you have a lot of room to play with. When I got to the top part, I got myself a Milwaukee marker and marked down how much I have to cut down from the top row. This is a wet tile saw. I like to use this for my backsplash projects. It runs with water, and all you need to do is to run your tiles through this and make your cuts. It does a wonderful job, and it's capable of cutting so many different cuts. This is a manual tile saw. If the surface of your tile is flat and it doesn't have any textures or bumps in it, it's easy to cut them with this as well, but it has its own limitations. So if you have to cut around the receptacles or different weird angles, you have to use a grinder instead. After adding some tin set, I continued building the second row. The second row was just successfully done. It's time to move on to the third row. As you can see it here, we already have a receptacle here, so I have to show you how I tackle this. And also the bottom parts, basically where the first row of tiles sits, it's sitting slightly below the laser line, so I have to shim it up and bring it up. So I used some tile wedges to kind of shim up this piece of tile and bring it up a little bit. So this way I can have everything nicely lined up. You can even use wooden shims, like the shims that you can use for any carpentry project, and that's gonna be totally fine. I had these tile wedges, so I decided to use it. So I just put on the second tile, and as you can see on the very top part of this tile, it is covering that screw hole for that electrical box. So I left a mark where exactly it needs to be cut, and then this is how I cut it. I used my tile saw to make 2 little cuts on this, and then I used my tile nipper to break off that little part that has to come off. Now if we put it back in place, this is how it's gonna look. As you can see that the screw hole is completely clear. Now for the top one, I got another piece of tile and marked it exactly where it needs to be cut. I cut it down and put it in place. And after this, I repeated the same exact thing for the other side of it as well. It's time to put the next one on, and as you can see it here, it's not covering that hole on the very top part of that electrical box. But if you have to cut a different shape, you saw how exactly I cut that on my tile saw. The rest of the job is exactly the same. I just continue building these lines until I get to the end. This is the end of that wall. As you can see, I put the tilager in place and I leveled it up using my small level. And then I use the staples to keep it in place. This is a close-up look so you can see where exactly I place my staples, and as you can see, it looks super nice and sharp. The rest is easy again. We simply have to cut some tiles and put them in place and finish it up. Now finally my first wall is done and it's time to move on to the other one. This kitchen is an L shape and the corners extremely matter on L-shaped kitchens. I say that because if you step back and take a look at the whole job when it's done, you are definitely gonna notice all these corners, so it really matters. I really wanted to have full-size tiles on those corners. That's the reason why I started from there and finished up my first wall. Now that I'm starting my second wall, I start from that corner again. This way, when the whole job is done, it's gonna look so much nicer. These little details make a huge difference at the end, so if you follow them, I guarantee you're not gonna regret it. The rest of the project is just continuing what I showed you so far. So this is how it looks like after my tile job is done. I even put tiles on the side and top part of that window. This way, when it's done, the ceilings look so much taller and the whole job is gonna look a lot more beautiful. And by the way guys, if you remember, that end cabinet was sitting about 5/8 of an inch higher than the rest of the cabinets. So the countertop was higher. As you can see it here, I cut down about 5/8 of an inch from the bottom part of my tiles in this area, and it looks pretty nice and good. I normally allow this to sit overnight, and the next day I remove all my wedges, all the spacers, all that plastic, the tape, and everything that was on top of my countertop, and I clean up the entire area nice and good. Then I get myself a nice and clean microfiber cloth and I go over all these tiles and make sure everything is completely nice and clean and there's absolutely no debris on top of the tiles and my countertops. I highly recommend you to use this grout maximizers instead of water with your grout. Basically, when you use this instead of water, it is going to add a lot of strength to your grout lines, and not only that, it is going to make it a stain proof. Especially that this is a kitchen and you're going to have a lot of food particle and oil in here. It is going to prevent your grout lines from getting dirty or stained. All you need to do is to pour this inside your bucket and then add your grout to it. In my case, I'm using sanded grout because my grout lines are about 1/8 of an inch thick. Anytime your grout lines are more than 1/8 of an inch thick, you have to use sanded grout. Keep that also in mind. We need to mix these again until we hit the consistency of peanut butter. We're gonna wait for about 2 to 3 minutes and then we're gonna mix it again and then it's time to apply it. These tiles are not flat and they kind of have some bumps on it. It's a wavy kind of a surface. So I found it a little bit easier to apply this grout by hand. Basically, all I'm doing is pushing this grout inside those grout lines and kind of make it nice and even throughout the whole process. And then I use that squeegee to kind of clean up the surface. It does a great job removing the excess material, but it's not that easy to apply the actual stuff inside these seams. Just keep in mind, every time you touch the grout, you have to wear gloves, and it is going to prevent your hands from getting dried up so much the next day. It is a horrible feeling. Make sure to wear gloves. It is extremely important. It's a must. I mostly apply my grout to an area about 4 to 6 square feet at a time. If you go more than this, it's gonna dry up by the time you come back to clean it, so it is gonna make it difficult. Just make sure to work in manageable portions. Once the grout is applied, I get myself a bucket of water and some sponges. I wet down my sponge inside the water and go over all these seams and make sure everything is all nice and clean. I just want to remove all those excess material so it doesn't dry up on the surface of my tiles. Generally speaking, when you're trying to wash off the surface of these tiles right after the grout is done, you want to go with an X pattern when you're cleaning it. That way you're not pulling any grout out of these seams. Because the surface of my tiles are wavy here, it wasn't that easy to go with X pattern only, so I had to go with cross, X, and circle pattern just so I can clean it up and make it look nice and good. And also keep in mind, when you're working with the grout, you don't have that much time. Pretty much around 35 minutes the grout gets hard and it's going to be very difficult to work with it. I'd say at the very max you have about 30 to 35 minutes of work time with it. So it is a very good idea if you have someone to help you out. It is going to make it a lot easier and less stressful on yourself. So basically you can apply this grout onto the walls and the next person can wash off right after you. This way it's going to be a lot easier and you're going to manage it, especially if it's your first time doing this. The grout job was just done and this is how it should look like. I cleaned up all the countertops and this is what we got. Now I'm gonna let this to sit for at least 4 to 5 hours. That way the grout kind of gets hardened up. After that you're gonna notice a very fine haze or dust on the surface of the tiles. That just needs to be cleaned up with a nice and dry microfiber cloth and we're ready to move on to the next step. Because we installed these tiles, the junction box is sitting pretty much about 3/8 or 1/4 of an inch below the surface. So legally speaking, we are supposed to use these junction box extensions, and this is how it goes on. Basically, it goes over the actual receptacle and it sits inside the box. This way our box is completely extended to the outside part or the surface, and then we can push this receptacle back inside the box and put our screws on and call it a day. These junction box extensions normally come in double gang, triple gang, and it also comes in plastic form as well in case you have plastic boxes. So it is required by electrical code. It needs to be done. I've noticed many people don't talk about it. But hey, in this channel, I gotta show you the right stuff. So now this is a close-up look at that junction box. You can see how it looks like. And of course, we have to put that cover plate back on top when we're done. After a couple of days that the grout lines are completely nice and dry, it's time to use the sealer and seal them up. I poured the grout sealer inside a small container and I'm using my brush to apply it right on. It is gonna get to the surface of my tiles also. It is okay because I'm gonna clean it up immediately with a microfiber cloth. This way the tiles are not gonna get a stain. In case you use the stone tiles, make sure to apply this on all your tiles as well and allow it to soak in for like maybe 1 minute and then use a microfiber to clean it up. I normally do this in 2 coats and I wait about 2 hours in between the coats. This way I'm gonna make sure that it's completely nice and sealed. After a few hours, when this stuff dries up, your tiles and your grout line is gonna be completely protected against any stain or any discoloration in the future. Just make sure to clean up the surface of your tiles while it's wet so it doesn't stain your tiles. Now the very last thing we need to do is to apply some silicone on the very bottom part where the countertop meets the tiles. So in order to do that, I apply a piece of tape about 1/8 of an inch away from the wall. This is how it looks like close up. This is a specialty sanded caulk that I use for all my tile jobs. It has sand particles inside it, so when you apply it, it looks exactly like grout. And it does come in so many different colors, so you can get the exact matching color to your grout. Unfortunately, the color that I needed wasn't available, and the other ones that were next to this were pretty off from the color that I needed, so I had to go with clear silicone. So in my case, I picked the nicest, cleanest, clearest silicone that I could pick, and I decided to use that instead. I cut my tip at 45 degrees, just like this, and I apply a very nice and thin coat of this on the very corner. If your stone countertop was just installed, it is gonna sag over time, so make sure to do this after 3 months so your silicone or your caulking is not cracked down right away. Here I am applying a little bit of soapy water to the surface of the silicone and then I clean up the excess with my finger. And we want to remove that tape immediately as soon as we're done cleaning it up. You just don't want to clean up that water because the silicone is still wet. I would say wait a few hours before you clean up that soapy water residue. Congratulations, the job is finally done and this is how it looks like. I'm gonna show you the before one more time so you can see it. Please let me know in the comment sections what do you think of this. And if you have a question, please make sure to drop me a comment. I'm always here to answer. Thanks a million for watching this video. I hope this video was a help to you guys. And if you are interested in the nature of renovations and you want to save yourself some time and money and do a lot of projects by yourself, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and watch the rest of my videos. There's a bunch of cool stuff in there. I'm pretty sure you're gonna like it. Thanks a million for watching this video again. See you in the next one. Till then, peace.